Well, don't hit me. Well, great afternoon to all, and all a great afternoon. Appreciate you all taking the time to be here. We're going to go ahead and get started with the House Appropriations Committee Education and Economic Development Subcommittee. So we'll call this meeting to order. We have our University System of Maryland today, so greatly appreciate everyone is here. But we're going to get started with our budget analyst, Ms. Sarah Baker.
Okay, I'm going to start with Exhibit 2 on page 7, which shows a change in fall undergraduate enrollment between 23 and 24. Overall enrollment grew 1.6%. However, when excluding Global Campus, enrollment grew 0.9%. 7 institutions saw enrollment increases, with UMES experienced the highest rate of growth of 10.5%. At 253, Towson had the largest decrease in the number of students. After 6 years of increase, the number of first-time students declined by 79 when excluding Global Campus. Exhibit 3 on page 8 shows if enrollment has returned to pre-pandemic levels using fall 2019 as a baseline for comparison. When including GC, enrollment is slightly below the pre-pandemic level by 669 students. However, when excluding GC, enrollment is down by almost 6,700 students, with 3 institutions, Towson, Salisbury, and Frostburg, accounting for 86% of the decline, and this mirrors a national trend at the regional universities. This leads to concerns about the financial impacts this has on the institutions, as they need to find ways to cover loss of tuition and auxiliary revenues. Exhibit 4 on page 9 breaks down the undergraduate enrollment by status. Despite a slight decline in fall 24, the number of first-time students exceeds the pre-pandemic level by over 1,700. While the number of continuing students increased to almost 96,000, it is below the pre-pandemic level of over 98,000 students. Exhibit 5 on page 10 shows the diversity of the undergraduate student body. Overall, since fall 2019, underrepresented minorities have comprised an increasing portion of the student body, comprising 41% of the students by fall 24, while white students went from comprising 42% to 33%. And this follows a national trend in which enrollment of white students has been declining over the last 10 years. From 2012 to 2022 in Maryland, while enrollment across all segments of higher education decreased by 13.8%, enrollment of white students decreased by 31.1%. As shown on Exhibit 6 on page 11, nationally at the public 4-year institutions between fall 22 and 24, only enrollment of white students declined. Exhibit 7 on page 12 compares the retention rates of the cohort before the pandemic hit and the 24 cohort. In general, the retention rate of the 24 cohort is below that of the 2019 cohort by 1 to 2 percentage points, except for Coppin, where the rate is 9% lower than the 2019 cohort. Exhibit 18 on page 13 shows a third-year retention rate. And overall, the rates for the 22 and 23 cohorts has been a mixed bag, improving at some institutions, declining at others. The rates for the 23 cohorts are 2 to 7 percentage points lower than that of the 2019 cohort. Turning to graduation rates on page 14, Exhibit 9 compares the 6-year graduation rates of the 2014 and 2019 cohorts. Overall, USM attained its highest rate of 61% with a 14 cohort, which was one of the last to graduate before the pandemic. The rate has since fallen to 57% with the 2019 cohort, which can be attributed to the pandemic in which fewer students enrolled or came back to campus. And this impact can be seen in undergraduate degree production, as shown on Exhibit 10 on page 15. After increasing to the highest number of degrees in 22, the numbers of degrees has decreased by 4.9% in 24. Now, if you exclude Global Campus since 2020, the number of degrees awarded has declined to 18,619, which is the fewest awarded since 2012. Exhibit 11 on page 16 breaks down degrees awarded by STEM, health, and other programs. The goal of USM's strategic plan is to increase the number of STEM degrees by at least 10,000 and health professions by 2,500. While the number of STEM degrees has increased to over 9,524, health profession degrees have fallen 15% to over 2,100. A key factor in improving student success is access to financial aid, as students face various financial challenges from how to pay to school to covering rent and food. And these stresses can affect the ability to concentrate on coursework and lead them to stopping or dropping out. Exhibit 12 on page 18 shows total expenditures on institutional aid. And you'll notice that the spending on need-based aid significantly increased by $38.5 million in 23 and 24. Now, students who receive aid are more likely to succeed, and Exhibit 13 on page 19 shows the 6-year graduation rate of first-time and community college students who received aid and didn't receive institutional aid, and overall those who received aid graduate at a higher rate. Moving to Exhibit 14 on page 20 in research expenditures. Overall, from 2019 to 23, total expenditures across all institutions increased by $369.6 million, with College Park and UMB accounting for $288 million of the increase. Just to note that in 2019, College Park and UMB began reporting as one research unit, and as such was ranked number 14th in the country in 23. Turning to the budget on page 21, Exhibit 15 shows the allocation of last July's BPW cost containment actions, which resulted in an overall $23.9 million reduction in USM's appropriation. Institutions have met the reductions through hiring freezes and reducing spending on contractual services, travel, and facility renewal. Exhibit 16 on page 22 shows the one-time funding added during the session that totaled $17.2 million. With Rural Health Scholarship and Dental Emergency Clinic at UMB continuing to receive funding in the allowance. Exhibit 17 on page 24 shows the proposed budget. State funds decreased 4.9% or $105.5 million when excluding the impact of the 25 general salary increase in 26, which are not included in the 25 working appropriation. Exhibit 18 on page 26 illustrates the puts and takes in the allowance, with the largest being $111.1 million or 5% reduction to USM's appropriation. $5.2 million is related to the removal of one-time legislative ads, and there is a $1.2 million reduction to Bowie's allocation of the HBCU settlement funds. The allowance does include $5.5 million for funding mandates and $1.3 million for two initiatives. One is $1 million for Coppin to develop 6 program plans for 6 capital projects, and $250,000 of state matching funds for UMES's agricultural extension program. In addition, there is $3.8 million to fund operating costs of new facilities and $1.7 million for equipment debt service. We asked the Chancellor to comment on the actions institutions will take to reduce their budgets in order to offset the reduction in state funding. Exhibit 19 on page 28 shows state funding per full-time equivalent student. And as you see in 23, there was a jump in funding, and that was related to a variety of factors, including general salary increases, restoration of the 21 BPW reductions, and the first year the HBCUs received settlement funds. While Coppin has the highest level of funding due to continuing enrollment declines, in 24, just note that the funding slightly declined by $254 per FTEs due to a slight increase in enrollment. And UBAL at the next highest level of funding reflects the continuing decline in their enrollment. The first issue, the revised tuition policy, starts on page 30. In setting tuition rates, the Chancellor, in consultation with the regents and the presidents, will establish guidelines from which presidents will recommend tuition rates. And this allows presidents to determine the appropriate tuition increases for their institutions rather than implementing a system-wide increase in in-state tuition. The policy also includes a process and criteria for institutions to implement differential tuitions, in which in prior years they needed to request an exemption. This applies to undergraduate academic programs, programs delivered in different modalities, military, federal, and private contracts, and geographical area. Institutions implementing a differential tuition must submit reports to the regions which documents the impact of the tuition differential. And as listed on page 31, the report needs to include such information as baseline data, outcomes, and any negative incomes, unexpected changes, or adjustments. The second issue, a prison education program, starts on page 32. As you may recall, that incarcerated individuals are now eligible to receive Pell Grants. And USM has been in discussion with various segments, higher education segments in Department of Corrections regarding participation and partnerships to offer programs in prisons. USM hired a consultant to develop a statewide plan, which is expanded to include any institution offering a program in a prison. The findings of the consultants are listed on the bottom of the page and on to the next, and include that there is a demand for higher ed education in prisons. The approval and startup process is a significant barrier to starting programs, and data tracking and sharing is the most important support a statewide system can provide. So last year, Department of Corrections and USM entered into an MOU that established a framework for implementing programs in every state correctional facility. This is the first correctional division in the country to formalize an MOU with a state university system. And the MOU streamlines the process in that institutions will sign university agreements with the department as an addendum to the MOU, and that the proposed programs will be in accordance with the goals of the MOUs, and these are listed at the bottom of the page. On page 34 and 35 is a listing of current program offerings, and on page 36 is the recommendation to concur with the governor's allowance. And that concludes my presentation.
Well, thank you so much for this analysis, Ms. Baker. Appreciate it. Any questions by analysts? Seeing no questions. So we have our chancellor at this time, and you can bring up anyone else that you would like at this time. And just let us know the names once you get here, and we can cross them off.
Well, thank you very much, Vice Chair Harris and members of the subcommittee. As always, we appreciate the opportunity to testify in support of the governor's budget proposal for the USM. I'd like to thank Ms. Baker for her typical excellent work in summarizing the status of the USM. I'm joined here by Senior Vice Chancellor Ellen Herbst and Senior Vice Chancellor Allison Wren. But if you'll give me the opportunity, Mr. Chair, I also want to recognize our presidents, who are obviously so important to getting the job done. So we have President Groh of Bowie State University, President Morales Wilhelm of UMCES, President Lynn Lepre of Salisbury University. Let me twist this way. President Fowler of UMGC, President Heidi Anderson of UMES, and President Mark Ginsburg of Towson University. The others wish they could be here, but I think this is a very good representation of our great presidents. As I enter my 6th year as chancellor, I'm a proud person. I'm deeply proud of the system's role in driving Maryland's growth. I'm proud of the excellence our universities have achieved with your excellent support. What that investment has enabled is really nothing less than our foundational mission, which is to put a college education within the reach of any Marylander who wants one. I understand Governor Moore's position that a 4-year degree isn't required for a successful life. I absolutely agree. And I certainly, speaking for the system, support programs that put success into the hands of those who choose a different path from college. For us, we've focused for years on K-12 preparation, which we're increasing in terms of our attention, and college affordability. We believe that our purpose is to build a system of public higher education that's accessible to all who choose college, for whatever reason they choose it. And that's what we're doing. 20 years ago, Maryland's public universities were among the most expensive in the nation for in-state undergraduates. I need you to know that today, 26 states are more expensive than Maryland. That's the impact of your support for public higher education. And for students who still need financial help, 27,000 last year, our universities awarded just over $100 million in aid. That's in addition to federal and state aid. And it's a pool of money that's nearly doubled over the last 10 years. Affordability. So it's hardly surprising that last year, 59% of our undergraduates earned their degree without accruing any student loan debt. This affordability explains in part our second straight year of climbing enrollment, a near record number of full-time freshmen, growth among our transfer students, graduate students, and taken together, growth at our HBCUs. But of course, as Maryland faces a serious deficit, we understand the challenges guiding budgetary decisions. We understand that we're not alone in making tough choices and that we have to do our part to restore Maryland to fiscal health, which leads me to the question posed by our analyst. I've been asked to comment on actions our universities will take to reduce their operating budgets, offsetting the reduction in state funding. I must say very plainly and clearly that the nearly 5% cut we're sustaining is going to be difficult for our universities, for the faculty and staff they employ, for the students they educate. We're obviously in the business of serving people, and there's very little we can cut that won't have a real and significant impact on them. By the way, cutting costs, it's nothing new to us. Over the last 22 years, our effectiveness and efficiency efforts stood up by the regents have netted $1.6 billion in cost avoidance, cost savings, and revenue generation. And of course, we're honored that these savings are returned to Maryland taxpayers. But the other side of the coin is that the result of these efforts should indicate to all that we're already lean. We've already made the cuts you might call painless. So we've got difficult decisions ahead. Let me summarize for you in saying that the cuts are going to have three main impacts. The first is workforce impact. Most of our operating budget is spent, as you might assume, on personnel. And so personnel has to be a large part of our response. We estimate that workforce actions are going to absorb 40% of our cut, 45 million of that 111 million. And we estimate that these actions will affect about 400 positions. Now, let me be clear. In that 400, there's a combination of eliminating vacant positions and reducing filled positions. Many of the filled positions are contingent or part-time, but those are real people, and there are consequences, and we care about that. We fear that the unfilled faculty positions will grow our faculty to student ratios, which will potentially impact students' abilities to graduate on time. And because, yes, we're responsible for so much of Maryland's workforce, we award about 80% of the bachelor's degrees that are awarded in this state. We're concerned about the impact of our reduced capacity on the state's most urgent workforce needs, which are STEM, healthcare, teaching. Many of our universities will have to eliminate student-facing positions, such as advising, counseling, mental health services, career services, academic support. A great number of our students rely heavily on these services, yes, to get them through school and to a degree, especially our first generation and low-income students. So we're concerned about seeing a rise in dropout rates. So workforce impact 1, second category, operating impact. We'll intensify our efficiency efforts. Yes, we will cut costs on things like contractual services and supplies and fixed charges and travel expenses. We think we can get about 50% of what we need. Out of that kind of reduction, it's about $55 million. Third, facilities impact. We're going to reduce deferred maintenance to absorb the remaining 10% of the nut we need to crack, $11 million. This reduction is, of course, going to add to the deferred maintenance backlog and potentially increase future costs as our campus buildings age. Many of our buildings and the universities that they sit in are already challenged by critical building systems, the HVAC, the electrical, the sewer, and understandably, we worry about facility safety, which translates to student and employee safety. The campuses worry about more frequent disruptions to student learning, power goes out, about the impact of failing systems on the operating costs that we're trying to cut. So beyond these three, I want to say something about HBCU impact. While all of our universities will have to make difficult decisions, our HBCUs worry that cuts to student services and fundraising and marketing might stall the progress they've made under the HBCU settlement, intended, of course, to achieve funding equity. But through all of this, let me say that our #1 priority is to protect our people. That means holding as a last resort any action that's going to harm them. For our employees, this means that we're going to exhaust every personnel action we can before reducing our existing workforce. For our students, it means we'll continue to prioritize affordability and consider tuition increases only if our aggressive cost-cutting measures fall short. Yes, implementing these cuts will not be easy. The impact will not be painless. But as I've said, we're committed to doing our part as the state works toward fiscal health and economic growth. Mr. Chair, this concludes my testimony.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Chancellor. Appreciate your testimony on that. Any questions from? So I do have a quick question. So we know education is vital across the state. Education is vital, period. My quick question is, when we talked about workforce, operating impact, and deferred maintenance, the first one you talked about was the workforce impact for about 400 slots. Obviously, we'll look at eliminating vacants. Do we know what how many vacant numbers there are?
Yes, let me have Senior Vice Chancellor Herbst answer that.
Good afternoon. Our vacancy rate that we report quarterly to the state, our vacancy rate across the system, so as of December 30th, which is our latest number, we were just under 5% vacancy rate.
Got it.
Now, that's across the system, and of course, it varies within different categories in terms of faculty versus staff, et cetera, but we have all that detailed information.
I might comment further with the vacancy rate that, yes, one could argue that for vacancies that have been long held, one could assume, well, we learned how to get along without them, but sometimes these vacancies indicate an inability to find the people that we need for very specific niches.
Absolutely, I agree. And the other quick question is, so we 26 in the state for in Maryland, 26 state for expenses, right? So my question is, right? So we have 59% earned their degree without any debt. Where do we fall in the nation on that piece?
In terms of comparison on debt, that's a good question. Chad, do you know? He's the guy with the numbers.
I mean, because that's a good number to know.
Is that a brag number? I think that's what the chair is after.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. I'm Chad Muntz, Associate Vice Chancellor at the University System. I believe that is a brag, Chair. We do better than many segments of higher ed with debt. Most of our students not only graduate with less debt, but most of our undergrads are not taking out debt as they are part of the, or as the register for classes, especially our Maryland residents.
Absolutely.
So if I could add to that, we do everything we can to get money to the students that need it. For example, you've given us permission to segregate a piece of our endowment. Obviously, the endowment dollars are intended for specific purposes, but you've given us the ability to segregate a piece of that endowment and let it earn money held by the treasurer, and then use the income off that endowment while it's sitting there to award scholarships to the students. We also have been creative with what I call micro grants. We've got students who are faced with a horrible choice sometimes. They need $400 to either pay the rent or pay their tuition. It'd be a shame if somebody like that dropped out of college for $400 that our donors are willing to give them. And then beyond that, we've looked at what not a lot of money in terms of financial aid will do to increase graduation. We've looked now at our STEM graduates. It's not a lot of money. If you can award somebody $3,000, $5,000 beyond what you've already given them, or nothing at all, they have a much higher likelihood of graduating. So even a little bit of money in a variety of ways helps.
Absolutely, and I appreciate that. And the reason why I brought that particular question up is obviously the topic has been for years, it's about student debt. And to know that Maryland, in certain ways, is leading in keeping that debt down for our students is good to brag on, as well as helps with enrollment, right?
Yeah.
We can say, hey, you come to Maryland schools, and this is the possible outcome that you can have with an education here. So we definitely appreciate you all taking the time and providing us with that data and that information. Delegate Forbes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you so much, Dr. Perlman, for the presentation of the work that we do in Maryland in making higher education the best system in the country and affordable to all. What is the students that carry debt? What is the average debt of an undergraduate that has debt?
Sure, great question. And I keep track of this, and we use it as part of our metrics to evaluate our cost of education. So one of the guidelines that we established many years ago with the Board of Regents was to keep debt manageable, especially for our Maryland residents and our lower income Maryland residents. We want to see debt about 25% less than the average. So to answer your question specifically, about 33% of our students who do have debt, it's $10,000 or less. I mean, so it's very little. Our average and median for our in-state students is about 1 year cost of attendance, or about $35,000. So for 3 years of education, we can find a way to cover through financial aid, and then about 1 year of the 4 years would be student loan debt.
Well, that's an impressive statistic, too, to be able to brag on, because it really is an investment. It's a debt that invests in your future. And some families, I don't think, understand that, with all of the talk, as the chair said, about the cost of higher education, that an investment like that kind of debt will pay tenfold over the years in your career and your earnings. Can I ask a second question? Thank you. The Student Outreach and Support Offices, I know the one at Towson University is very active, and those are those micro grants and those helping people get over hurdles. Do we have them at all of our institutions?
Yeah, they may be called different things, but I should let you answer.
It's okay. Yes, everyone's got sort of an office through their, typically through their student affairs, but sometimes through their financial aid office, where students are told, come to us if you need help. And so, again, our job is to communicate with students to make sure that they know that we're available to them.
Terrific. That is an invaluable service, especially for people that are on the edge or on the cusp, that if they know someone's there to help them, they can continue their studies.
So I got to add again, since you're tolerating me, Delegate Forbes, the other thing that I am proud of is that in an increasing number of matters, we're not waiting for students who come for one kind of help or another, because sometimes they won't come till it's too late. So we've got all kinds of fancy data analytics to spot in advance when a student seems to be in trouble, and then we diplomatically reach out.
I know that's going on at Towson University. I've seen it firsthand with students that have come, my constituents. So thank you, and thank you for all you're doing. We really appreciate you.
I appreciate it. Any additional questions?
Thank you so much for your presentation. Is this on? Yes, okay. And your leadership, I know this is a challenging time for the system, and presenting sort of how you're approaching the cuts has been very helpful. I wanted to just get some context around the 400 positions you mentioned. I'll say that it is troubling that student support services are, as you said, mental health and counseling and advising. Those are things that really make the college experience what it is. So I just wondered if you have information around what those 400 positions really look like. Where do they sit within your institutions? Are they predominantly student service, student facing? And if you don't have that today, we can follow up with that detail. Be curious.
I'll let Vice Chancellor Herb give some of the details, but I will share we are not only looking at how we have to save money through cuts, but we're trying to be more proactive in how we serve our students. So we're trying to come across with some cost-effective measures to do some shared service purchases of online mental health providers and things like that. So we don't want to cut one moment of mental health support for our students, but how do we do that in a more cost-effective way? So that is going on at the same time. We're not just stopping all of those measures that we've been doing for so long, because we haven't finished. And so as new technologies emerge, we see if they're value to us and can save us money, and then we invest in them. But in terms of specifics, I don't know, Ellen, if you have them.
Yeah, thank you for the question, because I wanted to emphasize something, that these are plans, and we are continuing to refine them over time. And the way we think about it is the different buckets of things that we can affect. And so what we're sharing with you is what the current plan looks like at a very high level, but I would suspect we're going to be doing trade-offs before we're all done with this. So trading off the impacts, and that's really what it's going to be about. How do you balance impacts of this cut versus that cut versus something else? So no, we don't have that level of detail at this point. As the universities are working through exactly where the budget allocations are going to go into, we'll have more detail as we go along.
One more brag, please, on student success services and how we're approaching it. One of the things that we haven't done well in higher education writ large is actually where we locate services for students. You all remember this, go to this office over here and this office over here. So we have notable progress in that. For example, at Coppin State, if you visited Coppin State, there's a student success center in the library, one-stop shop. This is being built out at Salisbury, et cetera. Otherwise, again, if the student is busy or the student doesn't feel like it and it's not convenient, not going to happen. We're trying to be attentive to that.
And can I add, place also means online. Vice Chancellor Rinn mentioned online mental health services. Increasingly, our students want solutions that they can access online as well. That's not to take the place. That doesn't mean that in-person doesn't have a place. It does. But we also have to be cognizant of how our students want to be served.
Thank you.
Mr. Chancellor and your team, I apologize for my tardiness. I had to support a family member at the doctor. Sometimes the time doesn't always
I
add.
totally
I
understand.
felt as a physician, you might be able to understand that, but was listening in, and I do want to just say that, you know, we collectively have a lot of difficult decisions. We already know the well-publicized cuts that, you know, you're thinking may be necessary in order to meet the budget. But I want you to know that we understand that you have a very difficult job, and I know that you will not in any way endanger the quality of education that will be provided to the students. But we also want to make sure that staff members feel supported and safe in a world that's really unpredictable right now, particularly for anyone that's a government worker, let alone at the intersection of higher education and government service. And so I just want you to know that we're thinking not just through this one budget session, but kind of like we might have to rethink how we do business in general. And so any way we can continue to position Maryland as an oasis for students and researchers and all the above who can maybe really teach about science, learn about science, and experience things perhaps that are more difficult in other parts of our country, we should try to maybe position what makes things more challenging into a strength. And so I look forward to being a thought partner with all of the amazing presidents that you have assembled. I know they've all been acknowledged earlier, but I just want to say thank you. I've seen a lot of you on Zoom in recent months. It's nice to see you all. You look really great in person as well. Very sharp bunch. And so just thank you for the hard work that you're doing. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for supporting us so well. Your statement is very encouraging.
So we good? Any other questions? All right, so maybe make sure I didn't miss Linda Gooden?
Yeah, that Ms. Linda Gooden is our board chair, and she is ill today and apologizes.
Okay, absolutely. I just want to make sure we didn't.
Thank you for.
I didn't want to skip over.
Thank you.
So we got one more favorable with the amendments, Ms. Diana Williams. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Dion Williams, and I work for the USM at College Park as a contract administrator. I am here on behalf of my union, AFSCME Maryland, representing over 6,000 higher education workers to give our views as workers on the system. We are proud of our first master contract with the USM and its affiliates. After over 2 years of negotiations, we finally ratified our agreement last summer. It could not have happened without the support of the General Assembly and the enabling legislation that you passed. Thank you. We have begun meeting regularly with the system office for the first time in our history. These initial meetings with the Chancellor and Ellen Herbst have been positive, and we hope will bear fruit. However, at the institution level, we continue to have obstacles and compliance issues with our agreement. That said, our new agreement won some key victories for workers, including allowing contingent or contractual staff to finally convert to full-time regular status with benefits, as well as modest wage increases for our membership. We asked the General Assembly to ensure that our wage increases are fully funded so that frontline staff can continue to operate the system. Our membership, like other state employees, are stretched thin. We are doing more with less, whether that be at Frostburg, UMES, or on my campus. We would also ask that you work with us to find cost savings that don't impact personnel or students. This includes the continued obscene marketing budget at UMGC that DLS has flagged in the past, or any of the numerous contracts that have privatized state functions, including but not limited to dining, housekeeping, grounds, transportation, or maintenance across multiple campuses. We also believe outside anti-union counsel costing millions of dollars should be eliminated. In closing, we understand that cuts are hard. We hope that you also look to raise revenue this session so that those who can't afford to pay more in Maryland pay their fair share. We thank you for your support and stand ready to work with you to improve the USM.
Thank you for your time. Any questions? Yeah, we good? All right, I think that concludes our hearing for today. Appreciate you all for taking the time. Thank you for traveling down here and visiting us. We appreciate y'all and looking forward to working with you all even closer. That concludes our subcommittee hearing for today. Have a great one.